It began with whispers of disaster spreading through the Valkyrie Empire like a disease that no medicine could cure in the agricultural world of Valkar 7. Farmers woke to find their crops dying in the fields, and no matter what they tried, nothing could stop the blight that consumed their food. Scientists eventually discovered that a bioengineered plague had been released into the soil, one specifically designed to destroy Valkyrie plant life while leaving everything else untouched. And they had no cure. How is this possible? Demanded the planetary governor. Who could have created such a weapon? The scientists had no answer, but deep in their hearts, they already knew. 3 days later, a military shipyard in the Valkar Prime system experienced a catastrophic malfunction that killed 12,000 workers and destroyed 17 warships under construction. The official report called it an accident, but security recordings showed small devices attached to critical systems, devices that had been planted months ago and were waiting for the perfect moment to activate. And then the assassinations began. Grand Admiral Velthax was enjoying a private dinner with 2 of his most trusted commanders when his food suddenly turned to poison and his stomach survived because of his enhanced biology. But his 2 companions were not so fortunate, and as he lay in the hospital recovering, he finally understood the truth that had been staring him in the face for years. The humans were coming for them, and they had been preparing for this moment since the day New Harmony fell. Increase security on all high-ranking officers, he ordered, and find these human assassins before they strike again. But his orders came too late, as 3 more admirals died that same week in accidents that were clearly not accidents at all. Valkyrie population began to panic, and reports of human agents hiding among them spread through every world, creating a fear that no army could fight. And then the fleet RV Admiral Sarah Mitchell stood on the bridge of the HMS Remembrance, the flagship of a human armada unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, and she watched as her ships emerged from hyperspace above Valkar Prime. But the humans did not come alone. Beside them flew the vessels of the Morvathi remnant, ancient ships crewed by beings who remembered their own shame and sought redemption. And beside them came the Keth Collective. With their swift attack cruiser Solari Union had sent their entire home fleet, and 12 other species had contributed whatever ships they could sprite. Was an alliance of the wronged, united by shared suffering and guided by human patience. All ships report ready, said Commander David Okonkwo, the grandson of the president who had declared the duty 22 years ago. Signal the Valkyrie, Admiral Mitchell ordered. Give them one chance to surrender peacefully and face justice for their crimes. The message was sent, and the response came quick. Like Grand Admiral Velthax appeared on the view screen, his face twisted with fury and fear. You dare attack our home world? We will crush you as we crushed your pathetic colony. Admiral Mitchell smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. We gave you a chance, Grand Admiral. Remember that when your empire falls. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. All ships, begin the attack. And remember New Harmony. The Battle of Valkar Prime lasted 40 hours, and it was unlike any conflict the galaxy had ever witnessed. The Valkyrie fought with desperate fury, knowing that defeat meant the end of everything they had built, and they were formidable warriors who did not give ground easily. But the humans fought with something the Valkyrie could not understand: absolute certainty. When human ships were damaged, their crews did not retreat to safety. Instead, they aimed their crippled vessels at enemy command ships and accelerated to maximum speed. When ground forces faced overwhelming odds, they did not surrender. Instead, they advanced into the fire and took as many enemies with them as they could. A Valkyrie captain named Drex, who had survived the Battle of New Harmony years ago, captured a wounded human pilot and demanded to know why they fought this way. You cannot win every battle, Drex said. Why do you not retreat and live to fight another day? The pilot, a young woman with blood running down her face, looked at him with eyes that held no fear. Because if I die today, my daughter will be here tomorrow, she said. And if she dies, her son will come after her, and his children after him, until the last Valkyrie has answered for what you did at New Harmony. Drex felt cold terror grip his hearts as he finally understood what the elder Morvathi had tried to warn them about. All those years Agathi's creatures did not fight like other species, because they did not see death as the end of anything for them. Death was just passing the duty to the next generation the surface of Velkar Prime. Human troops landed alongside their allies and began a systematic advance toward the capital city. Leading one of the assault teams was Elena Santos, who had finally emerged from the caves of New Harmony to join the invasion for Sesh. Had spent 22 years preparing for this moment, training in darkness and dreaming of the day she would stand in the light of the Velkari Sano. That day had come. Her team fought their way through the streets of the capital, and everywhere they went, they found Velkari who remembered the warnings they had ignored. The humans are here. They screamed as they fled. The humans remember. Elena reached the central plaza just as the sun was setting, and she looked up at the massive statue of Grand Admiral Velthax that dominated the square. "My mother's name was Maria Santos," she said quietly, "and she asked me to remember your face." As she raised her weapon and fired, and the statue crumbled to dusty morning. The Velkari government had fallen, and their military command had been captured. But the human fleet did not celebrate victory. Instead, Admiral Mitchell broadcast a message to every world in the Velkari Empire: the war is not over. She announced, "Justice has not been fully served, and we will continue until every crime has been answered for, every victim has been honored, and every Velkari understands that some debts can never be forgotten." The Velkari, who heard this message, understood that their nightmare was just beginning. The humans had won the first great battle, but they showed no interest in peace. They were not conquerors seeking territory or wealth. They were hunters seeking justice, and they would not stop until their duty was completed. Admiral Velthax was found hiding in a bunker beneath the capital, and he was brought before Admiral Mitchell in chains. "What do you want from us?" he demanded. "Name your price and take it. Just end this war." Mitchell looked at him with eyes that held 40 years of accumulated grief and determination. "We want justice," she said. "And justice takes time, so get comfortable, Grand Admiral, because we are nowhere near finished with your people." She turned and walked away, leaving him to contemplate a future he never imagined possible. The hunt had begun, and it would continue for as long as necessary. That was the duty, and humanity would never abandon it. 15 years had passed since the fall of New Harmony, and the galaxy had largely forgotten about the human tragedy that once made headlines across 1,000 worlds. The Velkari had expanded their territory even further, taking to more human border colonies with minimal resistance, and they had grown confident in their belief that humanity was broken. Supreme Commander Velthax had been promoted to Grand Admiral, and he often used the conquest of New Harmony as an example of how to properly subjugate inferior species. "Strike hard and strike fast," he would tell young officers, "and the prey will learn its place." But while the Velkari celebrated their victories, humanity was doing something the galaxy had never seen before. They were preparing for a war that would span generations on Earth. A girl named Yuki Tanaka sat in her classroom with 30 other students, all of them about 12 years old, and they listened as their teacher activated a holographic display. "Today, we continue our studies of the duty," the teacher said, and the faces of the New Harmony dead began to appear one by one. This was Maria Santos, the teacher explained, as a kind-faced woman with dark hair appeared before them. She was 34 years old when she died defending her neighborhood, and she left behind a daughter named Elena. Yuki watched the image carefully, memorizing every detail of Maria's face. "Can anyone tell me what Maria's final message was?" The teacher, a Skita boy in the front row, raised his hand. She said, "To remember their faces, remember what they did, and never forget, never forgive." That is correct. And why do we remember these words? Because the duty passes from generation to generation. The class recited together. "And what our parents began, we will continue, and what we cannot finish, our children will complete." The scene was repeated in classrooms across every human world, as an entire generation was raised not on hatred, but on something far more powerful: sacred remembrance. Meanwhile, in the hidden laboratories of Earth and its colonies, human scientists worked without rest on projects that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. Dr. Anya Petrov led a team that studied every piece of Velkari technology they could obtain, taking apart captured weapons and ships to understand exactly how they worked. "Their shields have a weakness in the lower frequency ranges," she told her colleagues one night after months of analysis. "If we can develop weapons that exploit this vulnerability, Their defenses become meaningless. Another team led by Dr. James Chen focused on something even more important, understanding the Valkyrie themselves. They studied the biology of Valkyrie prisoners, learned their language until they could speak it perfectly, and mapped every aspect of their psychology and culture. They are warriors who respect strength above all else, Dr. Chen concluded. But they have a blind spot when it comes to patience. Because their own culture values quick and decisive victory, then we will use that against them, said Admiral Sarah Mitchell, who had once been Ambassador Chen and had watched the Galactic Council vote to condemn her people to destruction. We will be so patient that they forget to be afraid of us across the galaxy. Small human ships traveled to distant worlds on missions that seemed harmless enough, and their crews traded goods, shared stories, and made friends with species the Valkyrie had wronged over the centuries. The Kef Collective had lost 3 worlds to Valkyrie aggression. The Solari Union had been forced to pay tribute for 100 years, and the Morvathi remnants still remembered their ancient Shimedo. Each of these species, the human traders offered something simple, friendship, and a promise when the time comes. They would say, "Will you remember who stood with you, and will you stand with us in return?" And one by one, across dozens of species and hundreds of worlds, the answer was the same: we will remember. The Valkyrie had no idea that their past cruelties were being woven into an alliance that would one day destroy them, and they continued to celebrate their power, while ignoring the whispers of change. But nowhere was the transformation more dramatic than in the caves beneath New Harmony, where the 14,000 survivors had grown to nearly 20,000. Delina Santos was now a woman of 23, hardened by years of living in darkness and fighting a guerrilla war against the Valkyrie occupation above. She had taught herself to move through the tunnels without making a sound, to strike from the shadows and disappear before her enemies could react, and to wait with infinite patience for the perfect moment. Tonight, she was leading a raid on a Valkyrie supply depot. Remember, she whispered to her team of 12 fighters, "We are not here to win battles. We are here to remind them that we still exist, and that we are still watching." They moved through the darkness like ghosts, bypassing security systems they had spent months studying, and reached the depot without being detected. Inside, they found exactly what they had come for: weapons, medicine, and most importantly, information. "Download everything from their computers," Elena ordered. "Earth needs to know their patrol routes and communication codes." As her team worked, one of the younger fighters, a boy who had been born in the caves and never seen the sun, asked her a question. "Elena, do you really believe we can win against them? They have ships and armies, and we have nothing but tunnels and shadows." Elena smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "We do not need to win, Marcus. We only need to never stop fighting, because as long as we are here, they cannot rest, and as long as we are here, the humans of Earth know that New Harmony did not die. It just went underground." When the Valkyrie commander of the occupation force discovered the raid the next morning, he was furious, but not surprised that the cave dwellers had become a constant irritation, striking without warning and vanishing before his troops could respond. And despite 15 years of searching, he had never been able to find their main settlements. But this time, they had left something behind. In the wall of the depot, written in the Valkyrie language, was a message that made his blood run cold. "You killed our parents. We have not forgotten. We are coming." And beneath the message were 19,000 handprints, pressed into the wall with pigments made from the native soil, each one representing a survivor who remembered the massacre and had sworn to see justice. Donath commander ordered the wall destroyed, but the message had already been photographed and shared among his troops, and fear began to spread through the occupation forces. At night, the commander sent a patrol to search the tunnels near the depot, hoping to find some trace of the accursed. Patrol never returned. When search teams found them 3 days later, they discovered something that would haunt Valkyrie nightmares. For years to come, soldiers were unharmed, merely unconscious, but their weapons had been taken and arranged in a careful circle around a single word, carved into the stone floor. Soon, the commander requested reinforcements from the Valkyrie High Command, but his superiors dismissed his concerns. "They are just primitives hiding in caves," they said. "They cannot threaten our mighty empire." But on Earth, Admiral Mitchell received the report of the successful raid with a satisfied smile. "Tell Elena her mother would be proud," she said. And tell her that soon is exactly right. She looked out at the shipyards, where new vessels were being constructed using technology the Valkyrie could not even imagine. And she allowed herself a moment of anticipation. Preparations were almost complete. The duty was about to enter its next phase, and the Valkyrie had no idea what was coming for them. The morning sun was just beginning to rise over the mountains of New Harmony when the first Valkyrie ships appeared in the sky. Maria Santos was walking her daughter Elena to school when she heard the strange humming sound above them, and she looked up to see dozens of dark shapes descending through the clouds like metal demons. Mama, what are those? Elena asked, her small hand gripping her mother's fingers tightly before Maria could answer. The first plasma blasts struck the city center, and buildings that had stood for 50 years were reduced to rubble in seconds. Valkyrie had come to claim their supreme commander. Velthax watched the attack from his flagship in orbit, surrounded by 40 warships that carried enough firepower to destroy a dozen worlds, and he smiled as reports of successful strikes came in from every sector of the colony. The orbital defenses have been eliminated, his tactical officer reported, and ground forces are deploying to secure the mining facilities. Excellent, Velthax replied. I expect full surrender within the hour, but the surrender never came. In the streets of New Harmony, the colonists refused to give up despite having almost no military weapons or training, and they fought back with everything they could find. Miners used their drilling equipment as weapons. Teachers threw improvised explosives made from cleaning chemicals, and even children helped by creating distractions and carrying messages between resistance groups. Maria had gotten Elena to a shelter beneath the school before joining the defense of her neighborhood, and she held a mining laser that she had never fired before in her life. They think we are easy prey, said old Thomas Burke, a retired soldier who had become a farmer on this peaceful world. But they will learn differently. The Valkyrie ground forces expected quick victory, but instead they found themselves fighting for every street and every building against an enemy that would not surrender no matter the cost. A Valkyrie captain named Drex led his squad into what seemed like an abandoned factory, only to have the ceiling collapse on them as hidden colonists triggered the supports and brought the entire structure down. These creatures are insane, Drex shouted into his communicator as he pulled himself from the rubble. They are killing themselves just to take a few of us with them. But the colonists were not insane. They simply understood something the Valkyrie did not. They knew they could not win this battle, but they could make sure the galaxy saw what was happening. And so every moment of the fighting was being recorded and transmitted to the Sol system. Every death was documented, every atrocity was captured, and every Valkyrie face was identified and saved in databases that would never be erased. Maria was wounded in the third hour of fighting when a plasma bolt struck the wall beside her and sent shrapnel into her arm. But she kept fighting until a second blast took her down completely as she lay dying in the street. She used her last moments to activate the camera on her communicator and pointed at the Valkyrie soldiers walking past her. Remember their faces, she whispered, knowing the recording would reach Earth. Remember what they did here, and never forget. Never forgive. By the time the sun set on New Harmony, the battle was over. Earth Valkyrie had won, but the cost had been far higher than anyone expected, and Supreme Commander Velthax was not pleased. As he read the final casualty reports, 800 soldiers dead, he demanded, how is this possible against a mining colony with no military? The humans fought with unexpected ferocity, his officer explained nervously. They used unconventional tactics and showed no regard for their own lives. Velthax slammed his fist on the console. And the survivors? 186,000 humans are confirmed dead, sir. But approximately 14,000 escaped into the cave systems beneath the mountains. Before we could secure the area, hunt them down, Velthax ordered. I want no witnesses left alive, but the caves of New Harmony ran deep and connected in ways that no Valkyrie scanner could fully map, and the survivors had already begun to disappear into the darkness. Among them was young Elena Santos, who had been pulled from the shelter by her teacher moments before the Valkyrie found it, and she had watched from the cave entrance as her city burned. Did not cry, because there would be time for tears later. Right now, she needed to remember everything she saw, everything she felt, so she could pass it on to others who would carry the memory forward in Earth. The transmissions from New Harmony were received in absolute silence. The leaders of the unified human government watched the footage without speaking, seeing the faces of their people as they fought and died, and hearing the final messages of colonists who knew they would not survive, but wanted their deaths to mean something precedent. James Okonkwo was the first to speak after the last transmission ended call, an emergency session of the Global Assembly, he said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of something ancient and dangerous. Every nation, every colony, every human being with the right to vote. The assembly convened within hours, with billions of people watching from every human world, and President Okonkwo stood before them. With the weight of history on his shoulders, the Valkyrie believe they have won today, he began. They believe they have taught us a lesson about our place in the galaxy. But they are wrong. The assembly was silent. Waiting today, we must decide how we will respond to what happened at New Harmony. And I ask you all a simple question. How long shall we pursue justice for our fallen brothers and sisters? Voices began to call out from the assembly, from homes and ships and colonies across human space. And they all said the same thing: until it is done. The vote was unanimous across every human world, and the result was recorded in documents that would be preserved for as long as humanity existed. Then let it be known, President Okonkwo declared, that from this day forward, humanity enters into a sacred duty, and we will not rest, we will not forget, and we will not forgive until justice is served upon those who murdered our people. But what came next surprised even those who expected immediate retaliation. There was no counterattack. Instead, humanity began to do something far more terrifying than any military response could have been. They began to teach their children in schools across human space. The curriculum changed to include the history of New Harmony, and students learned the names of every person who died there, seeing their faces on holographic displays and hearing their final message. Artists created memorials that would stand for centuries, and musicians wrote songs that turned grief into determination. The Valkyrie waited for the human fleet to attack, but weeks turned into months and months turned into years, and still nothing happened. They began to believe that humanity had accepted defeat, that the destruction of New Harmony had broken their spirit and shown them the futility of resistance. They could not have been more wrong. In the caves of New Harmony, Elena Santos was growing up among the 14,000 survivors who had become 19,000. As children were born in the darkness, and she was learning the skills she would need for the long fight ahead. She practiced fighting in silence, moving through tunnels without making a sound, and building weapons from the scraps the Valkyrie left behind. And every night, before she slept, she repeated the words her mother had spoken in her final message: remember their faces, remember what they did here, and never forget, never forgive. The Valkyrie had won the battle, but they had lost something far more important. They had given humanity a reason to hunt them forever. The great chamber of the Galactic Council stood silent as the Valkyrie delegation entered through the massive golden doors that had welcomed 1,000 species before them. Supreme Commander Velthax walked at the front of his warriors, his scaled body covered in ceremonial armor that gleamed under the artificial lights of Nexus Prime, and his 4 eyes scanned the assembled representatives. With barely hidden contempt, Valkyrie had conquered 12 star systems in the last century alone, and they had grown used to being feared by lesser species throughout the galaxy. They had come to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Velthax began, his voice echoing through the chamber. We stand before you to discuss the matter of the human territories along our border. The council members shifted in their seats as holographic displays showed maps of the region in question, and the human ambassador, a middle-aged woman named Sarah Chen, watched with growing concern as red markers appeared on human colony worlds. These territories contain mineral deposits essential to our continued expansion, Velthax continued, and the primitive humans who currently occupy them have refused our generous offers of peaceful relocation. Ambassador Chen stood immediately, her voice steady despite her anger. Generous offers? You demanded we abandon 3 colony worlds with a combined population of over 2 million people, and you offered nothing in return but threats. Velthax turned his massive head toward her and smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. We offered you your lives, human, and that is more than most species receive from us. The chamber erupted in murmurs. as various delegates whispered among themselves, and the council president, a floating crystalline being called Nexer, called for order. The Velkhari Dominion requests formal permission to conduct what they call an annexation initiative, Nexer announced, and this council must vote on whether to sanction or condemn such action. It was then that something unexpected happened from the shadows at the far end of the chamber. A figure began to move, and every delegate turned to watch as an ancient creature slowly made its way toward the central platform. The being was old beyond measure, its body withered and gray, with dozens of small eyes covering a face that had seen the rise and fall of empires. This was Elder Thexolan of the Morvathi, one of the oldest surviving members of a species that had once ruled half the galaxy. Morvathi rarely spoke at council meetings anymore, preferring to observe from their designated seats and occasionally cast a vote. So when the elder raised one trembling limb to request speaking rights, even Velthex fell silent. "I will speak," the elder said, and its voice was like dry leaves scraping across stone. Council President Nexer nodded with obvious respect. The council recognizes Elder Thexolan of the Morvathi remnant. The ancient being turned slowly, looking at each delegation in turn before finally fixing its many eyes on the Velkhari Supreme Commander. "You wish to attack the humans," it said, and the words hung in the air like a warning. Velthex straightened his posture and met the elder's gaze. "We wish to claim what should be ours." "Then you are fools," the elder replied, "and you will doom your species as we nearly doomed ours." A wave of surprised whispers swept through the chamber, and even Ambassador Chen looked confused by this unexpected defense. The elder continued, its voice growing slightly stronger as memories from long ago seemed to surface. 40,000 of your years ago, we were the greatest power in this galaxy, and we discovered a small blue world on the edge of explored space. A world teeming with primitive life. The holographic displays flickered and changed, showing images of an ancient Earth, its continents arranged in unfamiliar patterns. The creatures there had just begun to build with stone and metal, and we saw them as nothing more than animals to be studied or eliminated as needed. Velthax snorted dismissively. "What does this ancient history have to do with our proposal?" "Everything," the elder snapped, and for a moment its voice held an echo of the power the Morvathi once wielded. "Because we made the same mistake you are about to make." The chamber fell completely silent. "We attacked one of their settlements," the elder continued, "a small village near a river, and we killed many of them to study their biological responses to our weapons." Images appeared, showing the aftermath of that ancient attack, and Ambassador Chen felt a chill run down her spine. "We believed them to be simple animals, incapable of remembering or seeking revenge, and so we left their world and forgot about them for thousands of years." The elder paused and seemed to gather strength for what came next. "But the humans did not forget us, and they did not forgive us." "Impossible," one of the Velkhari officers scoffed. "They had no technology to track you across the stars. They had something far more dangerous." The elder replied, "They had memory, and they had children." The old creature turned to face the entire council. "The survivors of our attack told their children what happened, and those children told their children, and so on through hundreds of generations, and they never stopped passing down the story of what we did to them. This is ridiculous." Velthax laughed. "You expect us to fear a species that still dies from simple diseases and measures their lives in mere decades?" The elder's many eyes focused on him with an intensity that made even the hardened warrior uncomfortable. "That is precisely why you should fear them, Commander, because they know their time is short, and so they pass everything to the next generation. Their knowledge, their culture, their hatreds, and most importantly, their promises of vengeance. And what happened when they found you among the stars?" Ambassador Chen asked quietly. Genuinely curious about this history she had never heard. Elder was silent for a long moment. "They hunted us," it finally said, "not for resources or territory or power, but simply because we had wronged their ancestors thousands of years before, and they had promised to make us pay." The mighty Morvathi, brought low by primitives. Velthax mocked. "We lost 90% of our worlds," the elder replied flatly. "We lost 80% of our population, and we lost our place as the rulers of this galaxy. And even now, after 40,000 years, there are humans who remember what we did and humans who watch our every move." The chamber had grown very quiet. "Do not attack the humans," the elder warned, looking directly at Velthax. "Because if you do, they will hunt you forever, and they will teach their children to hunt you, and their children's children, and it will never end until your species is dust and memory." Velthax stood tall and proud. "The Velkari are not the more Vathi, elder, and we do not fear these short-lived creatures. Then you will learn as we did," the elder whispered. "And I weep for your descendants." The vote was called, and it passed 8-2 in favor of the Velkari annexation as the council adjourned. The elder slowly made its way back to the shadows. Passing by Ambassador Chen on the way, "I am sorry," it said softly. "I tried to warn them." Chen nodded grimly. "When they come for us, we will remember that you tried, and that memory will be passed to our children as well." The elder paused and looked at her with something that might have been hope. "Perhaps that is how we begin to repay our ancient debt," it said, and then it disappeared into the darkness. Ambassador Chen watched it go, then turned to send an urgent message to Earth. The Velkari were coming, and humanity needed to prepare not just for war, but for something that would last far longer than any single battle. They needed to prepare for the duty. 40 years had passed since the massacre at New Harmony, and the once proud Velkari Empire had been reduced to a shadow of its former glory, where 12 star systems had once answered to their command, now only to remain. And even those were surrounded by human patrol ships that watched every movement with tireless vigilance. Velkari people lived in constant fear, never knowing when the next human strike would come or what form it would take. And their dreams were haunted by the faces of creatures who simply would not stop. Grand Admiral Velthax, now old and broken, had been dragged before the Galactic Council to beg for intervention, and he knelt on the same floor where he had once stood with such arrogance and pride. "Please," he said to the assembled delegates, his voice cracking with desperation, "you must make them stop. We accept that we were wrong. We will pay any price. Just make them stop." The council president looked at him with something between pity and contempt. "You were warned, Grand Admiral, and you chose to ignore that warning. So now you face the consequences of your own choices." From her seat among the human delegation, Ambassador Maya Okonkwo rose to speak. She was the granddaughter of the president who had first declared the duty, and she had been born into a world that measured time not in years, but in progress toward justice. "The Velkari have asked us to end our campaign," she announced to the council, "and we are prepared to accept their surrender under certain conditions." Hope flickered in the Grand Admiral's eyes, the first he had felt in decades. "Name them," he said. "Whatever you want, we will give it." Ambassador Okonkwo's expression did not change as she read from a document that had been prepared over the course of many years. "First, the Velkari will return every gram of resources they stole from human worlds, with interest calculated at standard galactic rates." "Agreed," Velthax said quickly. "Second, the Velkari will pay reparations to every human family that lost members during your attacks, and the amount will be determined by an independent tribunal." "Agreed." "Third, every individual who participated in the attacks on New Harmony and other human colonies, regardless of their current rank or position, will be handed over to face trial for their crimes." Velthax hesitated, knowing that this list included thousands of Velkari soldiers and officers, many of whom were now elderly or had become respected members of their society. "This will cause great hardship for many families," he said, "as your attacks caused great hardship for ours." The ambassador replied calmly, "Do you agree or not?" "I agree," he finally said. "And fourth, the Velkari will formally acknowledge in their historical records, in their educational systems, and in their cultural traditions exactly what they did to humanity and why it was wrong. And this acknowledgement will be passed down to every future generation, so that your people never forget the lesson they learned." This final demand was in some ways the most difficult, because it required the Velkari to admit their shame to their own children and grandchildren for all of time. But Velthax knew he had no choice. "We agree to all conditions," he said, bowing his head in defeat. Ambassador Okonkwo nodded slowly. "Then the duty enters its final phase, and the process of justice will continue until all conditions are satisfied. However long that may take." "How long do you expect it to take?" Velthax asked. "Generations," the ambassador replied. "But we are patient, and we have taught our children to be patient as well. So take as long as you need, and we will be here, watching and waiting and remembering." The Velkari agreed to everything, and the documents were signed before the entire Galactic Council. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Elder Thexalon of the Morvathi approached Ambassador Okonkwo. "You have done what we could not," the ancient being said. "You have made them understand we could not have done it without your warning." The ambassador replied, "And without your ships fighting beside ours, our debt to your species is not yet fully paid." The elder said, "But perhaps this is a beginning, perhaps it is." Ambassador Okonkwo agreed. "And we will remember your help as we remember everything else." The elder's many eyes seemed to smile. "That is exactly what I was afraid of," it said, "and exactly what I hoped for 1,000 years later." The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Humanity had spread across a quarter of the Milky Way. Their colonies numbered in the millions, and they had become one of the most respected and feared species in known spacebit. They had not forgotten their history, and they had not abandoned the lessons they learned in blood and fire in the rebuilt world of Velkar Prime. A young Velkari student named Kethros sat in a classroom that looked much like classrooms on any other planet, and listened as her teacher, a holographic artificial intelligence, displayed an image of a small blue world called Earth. "Today we continue our study of the first law of galactic diplomacy," the teacher announced, and Kethros sat up straighter. In her seat, every Velkari child learned this lesson, because it was carved into the walls of every government building and printed in the first pages of every school text. "Can anyone recite the law for us?" The teacher Kethros raised her hand. "Do not harm the humans," she said, her voice clear and confident. "They remember. They teach their children to remember, and they will never stop." "Very good," the teacher said. "And can you tell us why this law exists?" Kethros nodded, because she had heard this story 1,000 times from her parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, passed down through 40 generations. "Because long ago, our ancestors attacked a human colony called New Harmony and killed almost 200,000 people, and they thought the humans would accept defeat and move on." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But the humans did not move on, because they are not like other species, and their lives are short, but their memories are long, and they pass their promises to their children, like we pass our genes." "And what happened to our ancestors?" the teacher prompted. "The humans hunted them for 40 years, Kethros said, "and they did not stop until justice was served. And they made us promise to never forget what we did wrong, so that we would never make the same mistake again." "Correct," the teacher said. "And what is the lesson we learn from this history?" Kethros looked around at her classmates, all of whom knew the answer as well as she did: that some species forgive and forget, but the humans do neither. And if you wrong them, they will make you pay, not just for your lifetime, but for the lifetime of your children and your children's children, until the debt is cleared." The teacher nodded in satisfaction. "Humanity has been our most loyal ally for 800 years now," it said, "because they remember their enemies, but they also remember their friends, and they are just as dedicated to their friendships as they are to their vengeances." After class, Kethros walked through the streets of the rebuilt capital city, past the memorial that stood where the statue of Grand Admiral Velthax had once been. The memorial showed the faces of the New Harmony dead, all 186,000 of them, carved in eternal stone so that no one would ever forge. At the base of the memorial were words that every Velkari knew by heart: "They remembered us. Now we remember them. May this lesson echo through eternity." Kethros paused to read the words as she did every day, and she thought about the strange species that had once been her people's victims, and then their conquerors, and now their greatest friends. The humans had taught the galaxy many things, but the most important lesson was also the simplest: never attack the humans, because they will hunt you forever, and never befriend the humans falsely, because they will remember that betrayal just as clearly. But if you stand with them honestly and honor your word, they will stand with you through anything, and their friendship will last as long as their memory, which is to say, it will last forever. That was humanity's gift and humanity's curse, and the galaxy had finally learned to respect both, because humans never forget and they never, ever stop